Hi guys. So I thought I would try something a bit different because I felt like I wasn't able to reach everybody and I was talking way too fast. So for this week, what I wanted to do was I created a PowerPoint that includes the answers for page 3 and 4 for our research methods packet. And then I thought what I could do is I could create a recording of myself, and then you guys could watch that at your leisure. Fast forward to the spots, double check your own work, and then our Zoom call this week, maybe we could spend the beginning part of our time maybe just answering some questions that you have for clarification. And instead of me lecturing to you about page 3 and 4, you can use this as an opportunity to check your answers. So with that being said, I would like to get started. And when we look at, when we look at the question itself, honestly, I feel a little overwhelmed as I am right now because I can't seem to navigate through it all. Oh, goodness, you guys, give me grace here. All right, so from the beginning, um, FRQ packet pages 3 and 4 answers. First of all, you can't see it at the bottom, but what I wrote was holy mackerel. To read that entire paragraph would be a bit overwhelming for me. I know that if I was taking an exam, if I had this huge thing that I was supposed to read ahead of time and then try to navigate through the whole thing on top of feeling the pressure and stress of an exam, I would probably maybe miss some things. For you really good readers out there, I'm sure reading this wouldn't probably cause you any stress at all, and you'd be able to navigate and pull out the important points right away. So if this is too elementary for you, please just fast forward through. But for those of you who have a little bit of stress levels when you see a long paragraph like this, I'm just going to give you a couple tips of what I would do. As I'm reading this, the first thing I would do is I would have a piece of paper, or I would just write or underline some of the key components. And so I actually did that on my own sheet of paper. And as I read through it, I was like, all right, they're telling me there's two groups. And off to the side, I actually created this on my own. I'm like, all right, group A's got 30 people. There's they're either 25 years of age or younger. This group has distributed practice, which means space practice. They're going to do the practice 30 minutes a night for 4 nights. And then as I read on to the paragraph, I'm like, all right, group B says we've got 30 people as well, equal amounts, but this group has 60 plus years of age. And instead of doing distributed space practice, they're doing mass practice, or what's also called cramming. And they're going to study from 6:30 to 8:30 the night before the exam. They're going to test it on memory. They're going to do a recall test, and how they're going to measure that is they're going to see how fast they can recall the definitions. For me, if I was testing, instead of looking at the previous paragraph, um, that is a little overwhelming. So that if I created something like this, just a note sheet, it would make it a lot easier for me to be able to go back when I'm trying to answer the questions. So that's a really big tip that I'm going to try to encourage a lot of you guys to do a lot during these practice sessions. So here are the questions that it's asking you to do. In addition, another tip I would suggest for those of you who are a little stressed about exam taking is underline or circle what is it they are asking me to do. So I've got 4 questions here. They want to know the operational definition of the dependent variable. So I highlighted those key components. Then they go on and want to know about the ethical flaws and how they need to be corrected. So I have to think conceptually, like, well, what is the ethical flaw? And then what am I going to do to correct it? Same thing with the research flaw. And then how am I going to correct it? And then finally, what does it mean to say there's a statistical significance in this between the two groups? So let's get started. The very first question says, what is the operational definition of the dependent variable? So you cannot just say the results or the test scores. that would not be appropriate. So what I did was I, again, did the same thing that I did last time. If you didn't catch me, I have to say to myself, well, what's the independent variable and what's the dependent variable? I've got to just figure that out fairly quickly. So off to the side, I'm going to write the independent variable is if someone was placed in a distributed or massed group. So we're deciding whether they're in one group or the other. Then the dependent variable would be then the speed or time the definitions were recalled would be affected. So your answer has to include the dependent variable operational definition. And how are we defining that? You have to say something about speed or time. That's how they are defining it. So they're calculating it by how fast or how long it takes them to actually recall the definitions. That's the correct answer for the first one. The second question says, explain how the ethical flaw in the study can be corrected. Well, before I get into this side of the screen over here, let's look at this. I brought this back up so you guys can remember. We went over this early in the year, but you need to know this. You're going to need to know ethics. Make sure these 6 you memorize. This is a great page to have handy for yourself. You also received a copy of this in your notes, so you may still have something like this. So what are the 6 ethical guidelines? In order for me to understand what ethical guideline they didn't do, I need to remember the 6 ethical guidelines. You have to have informed consent. You have to not deceive the people in a way that actually it's really extreme. Some minor forms of deception are okay, but not major forms of deception. You may not coerce them, so you can't say you have to participate in the study or you're not going to get a grade. That's always a classic example. There must be a sense of anonymity, so they must be kept confidential. You can't release the names. I can't say, when Ben Faber did this actual experiment, this is his score that he received. All the names of the participants must be kept anonymous. There must be minimum risk, and that isn't just physical risk, but it's mental risk. So think about the studies that we've studied in the past. Stanford prison study, Milgram shocking experiment, and the list can go on and on and on, how we can talk about some of the biggest names in psychology actually did not follow this particular ethical guideline. And then you must debrief them. You must tell them the results, um, and why you were doing the particular study as much as you can tell them. So if we think back to the original study that was presented to you, and what it's asking is, well, what ethical guideline was actually violated here and how would you correct it? Well, if you look at the last sentence, the researcher provided a list of the names and test scores for each individual participant and a letter to every single person. Well, right there, that tells you you are not doing anonymity at all. So here's your answer. You must state how the researcher must correct the release of the participants' names. I have a couple examples listed here for you. One, you could say the researcher should provide a participant's data individually to the person. So you could just say, hey, this is what your results were, or you must obtain the permission to release the participants' names and scores. So you would have to actually ask everyone, is it okay if I give your information out to the rest of the group? So those would be 2 pretty decent examples of good answers. Moving on to number 3, explain how the research design flaw in the study must be corrected or can be corrected. So what is the design flaw that's happening? Well, if you go back to my initial notes that I took for myself when I was reading the prompt, I circled a couple things when I read this particular question. First of all, this group is 25 and under, and this group is 60 years and older. This group has a completely different type of control, and this group has mass practice. So what the problem with that is your independent variable varies within the age group. So Instead, you need to figure out this question here. How can you equalize your groups? So there's a couple ways you can equalize your groups. Otherwise, how you can say to yourself, well, maybe this group does better because it's just their age. And that's not what we're trying to test, their age alone. We're trying to test the groups itself. So you could say, to correct this flaw, you must make the age groups the same. So we could have everybody be 25 and under, or everybody be 60 and older in both groups. Or you could say, I'm going to create equal groups of using random assignment. So what that means is I've got people from the age of 10 to 80 in this group, and I've got people from the age of 10 to 80 in this group. There isn't one or the other. Moving on to question number 4. In this question, in a well-designed study, what does it mean to say that there is a statistical significant difference between the groups? When I taught this last year, I bet my students that there was going to be a question on statistical significance on the FRQ. They owed me some very yummy treats at the end. But what I want to show you here is this pretty easy slide. Sometimes students get so bogged down in some of the terminology. I can tell you, being part of the test design committee, the only thing you need to say if the term, what does statistical significance mean, is things did not happen because of chance. So let me break that down a little bit. In normal English, significant means something that's important. But in stats, significant means it's probably true. It's not due to chance. So when statisticians say a result is highly significant, they mean it's very probably true. They do not mean it's highly important. Right here in red, this is what I want you to write down or memorize or just jot down in your brain. Significant levels show you how likely a result is due to chance. So, in a well-designed study, what does it mean to say there is a statistical significant difference between the groups? All you needed to say was, it means that the results were not due to chance. If there is not a statistical significance between the two, then the researcher would say, ooh, this maybe happened because by a freakazoid accident, I had really smart people in one group and they were just crazily able to memorize everything I wanted them to memorize. And you don't want to be able to say that. You want to say the results are significant enough that it wasn't some chance operation that this happened. I hope that explains it enough. Keep it stupid simple. Really, I'm not kidding. When it comes to statistical significance, it's a mouthful, sorry. Just always say things were not related because of chance. All right, so now you had your you had your 3 multiple choice. So over here, here's the question. According to the ethical guidelines set by the American APA, which the following true of psychological research in animals? I highlighted the term animals. I put my animal in the fridge to show you that is not ethical. Do not do stuff like that. Ever. My family thinks I'm literally crazy, I'm sure. So here were all your choices. The answer is C. All I want you to know that you're going to, if they throw an animal question to you, personally, I don't think they're going to, because they are going to be very limited. But the only thing you need to know is over here to the right. You do not need to know exact animal ethics for psychology. You only need to know that there are guidelines that have to be considered when doing non-human research. So, answer, it should conform to all APA ethical guidelines for animal research. Very blank, non-specific, just a generalized answer that there are guidelines for animal research. That's all you need to know. Moving on to the next question. A survey. So we're talking about a survey showing that children who have encyclopedias in their homes earn better grades in school than children whose homes lack encyclopedias. Got a great comment from Miss Springer when I was reading through her answers, and she said, who the heck has encyclopedias anymore in their home? I thought that was kind of funny. So the research concludes, I highlighted that because that should give you a big red flag that having encyclopedias at home improves your grades. The conclusion is erroneous, and in parentheses I wrote, it is an error mistakenly. It's a mistake. Sometimes we don't understand the vocabulary and therefore we don't know how to answer it. So make sure you learn your vocabulary. So it says the conclusion is a mistake because the researcher has incorrectly done what? Here are your choices. Um, I forgot to highlight. It looks like the correct answer is E here. It can't be A because there's not enough information for A. It can't be B and C because this is not an experiment, and you can't conclude anything in a survey. The only thing you can say is correlation. A survey, the only thing that can give you a conclusion is an experiment. So that is null and void. D is backward. And remember, I always just want to stress to you guys, never, ever, ever in the entire world of psych can you say that one causes the other. So the problem is they inferred causation from correlation on this one. Again, I forgot to highlight the answer on this one, but last question, in order to yield information that's generalizable, oh my gosh, welcome back, right? Generalizable? General Generalizable. I don't think that's correct. And you can go ahead and make crap out of me all you want. Oh, that's a tough one. In order to yield information that it applies to everyone, let's just say, to the population from which it is drawn, a sample must be what? Your correct answer is D. It can't be A because this number is going to vary based on the population that you have. It can't be as large as possible because we don't know what the population is. C is not applicable. Yep, it must be representative. You must accurately represent the characteristics of a larger group. And then E is not practical. I hope this was helpful, other than my pronunciation of freaking words. And take a look at it. Give me your feedback on Thursday. I'll give you an agenda of what we're going to be doing. And if it's worth your time, join us with Zoom. Thanks, everybody. Good luck out there. Please keep giving me your questions if you have any. Take care and have a good day. Let me stop sharing.